Hello and welcome to DUI's banner review for December 28th Flash Gala 2024. Hope you guys are all having a great roulette period. Now, it's getting late here. There's a lot of things to talk about, so let's get straight into the banner characters. So this banner brings us a new Grand Yatima Water, and we also have a new permanent version of Aletheia. I'm going to leave Yatima till later, so let's talk about Aletheia first. So Aletheia, overall, in a nutshell, this character is a skill damage based, mostly full auto looking character, very similar to his Earth version. And I think in the future, once we get Lucius FLB in the upcoming event right here, / to sever binds, I think he will also work quite well with that character. Because if we have a look at part of his kit, we have this particular passive here. Raise Keen Edge level by 1 when a Dark ally uses a damage skill. So whenever anybody uses a red skill on Dark, then he gets these stacks. And whenever you have 3, you will consume them to activate Moonheart Gleam, which is this one. And when it's 3 or above, you will also dodge all attacks from foes. Oh, by the way, the auto attack, the auto nuke only happens when you dodge. So basically everybody clicks the red skills, you get dodge. Once you dodge, you will auto nuke with this. These skills here, we don't have damage numbers exactly yet. We don't have damage cap numbers, that is. But the debuffs here, it's okay. This one's effect is okay as well. Has flurry, which I think I would have preferred some other utility effect, like a debuff or a dispel or something like that. But instead his dispel is on his Ogi, and his Ogi takes his second skill off cooldown as well. I'm expecting pretty good skill numbers here though, to be fair. And then his third skill is very reminiscent of his Earth version's 4th skill, where it probably does 2 really big hits of damage and it takes his other skills off cooldown. The lockout and the cooldown will also decrease every time a Dark ally uses a damage skill. So there's that. And then as his second passive, he has a boost to Dark, Saber, and Katana specialty allies attack, defense, and multi-attack rate, and it also reduces their skill cooldowns by 1, right? So you can click those red skills a little bit more often. Yeah, overall this is looking at like a pretty solid full auto character. I do wish some of these skills had a little bit more utility. I think that would have made him a bit more useful, particularly like in HL if he had a couple more debuffs. But at the very least, for full auto, he does look quite good. And like I mentioned, I think there are plenty of Dark characters that have pretty good synergy with this character, because a lot of other full auto and permanent characters also have red skills, so you can make a decent sort of team with him. Okay, let's move on to obviously the big star of the banner, which is Yatima herself. So Yatima, ooh, okay, so lots to talk about this character. Let's firstly mention the weapon. So the weapon is pretty much a carbon copy of Grand Sandy's, the light version's weapon, Efes. So it is Water's Exalto weapon. It brings us Solaire, which is attack and crit, and it also brings us Stratagem, which is the amplified damage to any damage that is a critical hit. So earlier on stream, we were doing some calculations, some grid theory crafting, and please excuse the presentation, but this is sort of what we came up with. So these 3 here are single-sided grids, and if you are running 3 Yatima here, and if you have tie-side Galilei, this is 100% crit, and you get 20% then. All of these grids here are 100% crit. Single-sided, you can also do this, run 2 Yatimas and then an additional crit weapon here instead. You most notably get 6% less amp. But I think the main strength of this particular grid is that your crit weapon here can be Whammed Spear, the farmable one. And that gives you crit and supplemental in one weapon. And that way you essentially save 1 weapon slot. So since you don't have to run 2 PNS weapons. So I think this grid might have a place if grid slots are really starved. Now, this third single-sided grid is pretty much Hrisvelga locked, because I think most of the time you're going to want to run like some other weapons here, But for certain Hrsvelga grids, maybe this can be used as well. Basically, you don't need the third Yatima. With double Taisai, you will get 20%. You will get 14% amp and then 100% crit here as well. And then these bottom two are some double-sided grids. I don't really like this one, but it is technically 100% crit. But I don't like it because it's only 10% amp. It feels a little meme. I think this one is a bit more compelling. It is one extra grid slot, but it is double Yatima and then one Galilei. And then your second crit weapon slot can be pretty much most crit weapons. Wham the Spear does not fit though, because you only have 70% crit as I think with these three weapons. So it needs to be more than Wham the Spear. But yeah, things like Galilei, Taisai, Amenor will all work here. I think it will depend on pretty much what you want. If you want maybe some skill damage, Taisai is good. If you want more raw, Galilei will be good. And if you need triple attack, something like Amenor will be nice as well. So either way, all of this is to say that much like the light version and other exalted weapons, Yatima is looking to be at least a 2 of in your grid. And for optimized things, you will probably want 3 copies as well. It is a bow, so main hand wise, it's much harder to use. The main hand effect is that it gives echo and multi-attack rate, which are good echo effects. Like it's sort of similar to the Earth Draconic weapon. But yeah, being a bow does hold it back a fair amount, so do keep that in mind. Now, I've also received a bunch of questions about how this changes Taisai, Galilei, and the Whambrella, Whamdus's grand weapon priorities and how many you need for those. But at the moment, I think that's really hard to say. I haven't seen too much grid theory crafting, mostly crit calcs like what I've done. So it's hard to say whether, hey, you don't need, like, it's hard to say whether you need 1 or 2 Taisais now. It's hard to say whether you need 1 or 2 Galileis now, things like that. Since this is a crit weapon and you ultimately want to reach 100% crit most of the time, because since water doesn't have a good crit buffer overall, I think having those crit options available is nice. So yeah, do keep that in mind. Now, since all that weapon stuff is out of the way, let's talk about the character, the star of the banner. So, Yatima, let's look at her animations first. I really like the animation. This is very reminiscent of her summon pose. The laser coming down is like her summon too. And her autos are the coolest thing, where she calls all the M1 summons. We'll get to that in her kit in a moment. All right, so she is a special staff character. And Yatima at the moment is looking to be a strong character for longer full auto fights. Longer meaning things that are probably more than 5 turns for the most part. She has potential for normal attack lineups. I'm really excited to see what people cook up for those sorts of raids. I think she might also have some place in an Ogi sort of hybrid teams. And then for HL, I think people are going to try her. Whether she's going to be the best, I'm not sure. There's nothing super apparent in her kit that will make it work, other than the fact that she just functions really well after you take like pretty much 5 turns. So yeah, let's break down her kit a little bit. So first things first, her Ogi does massive water damage and it activates her first skill. While she has her unique buff, this changes to unworldly damage. We'll get to this unique buff later. But the skill it activates is this particular skill. Now, this particular skill, Decorative Spinel, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but either way, this does a lot of damage. I've seen it do tons and tons of damage. It gets up to 10 hits, so very good there. And most notably, it dispels, it gives echo, and it does this debuff here. Now this debuff, the defense is lowered and damage taken is supplemented, is very good, because the damage taken supplemented doesn't actually seem to be damage taken is supplemented, and it looks like a mistranslation, because from things like GameWin's Twitter, we can see that the way it's worded is actually very similar to damage taken amplified. So it is amplifying your damage up to a max of 10. 2 per stack. It stacks up to 5 times and you get up to 10% amp, and the defense is up to 20%. Over here, this is Google Translate, so it looks a little bit weird, but it's pretty much a seraphic type amplification. And the final damage formula is your damage multiplied by seraphic weapon, multiplied by this is damage taken amplified, and then finally Yatima. So this is, for all intents and purposes, another multiplicative final damage amplification effect that happens, and it goes up to 10. So this debuff is incredibly powerful, right? It's just a new sort of permanent debuff, and it doesn't seem too hard to get because it activates on her Ogi. So a very, very, very good utility and offensive debuff there. Okay, second skill here, boost the water allies defense, armor, and dispel cancel one time. I don't think we have the defense numbers yet, but we do know that this armor effect is quite impactful. So I believe, let me just quickly double check, but I believe on the blog post here, we can see that the S2 begins, I think I scrolled past it, sorry. Here we go, dispel, and then the block. Block is initially 60%, right? But if you have her unique stack, then it goes up to a maximum of 100% block. I think this is the first time we've seen 100% armor, but essentially that just means you don't take any damage. So the main thing is that you need this Delta mod thing. We'll get to that later. I forgot to talk about the Alpha mod here as well, but we'll get to that as well. It's part of her passives. The Delta mod, as long as you have a high level of that, if you have max level, then this will 100% block any incoming damage. So looking at the skill, I remember thinking, hey, this was a little bit lackluster, especially for the effects and the cooldown being 9 turns, and it probably drops down to 8 turns once you level her up. But yeah, if this goes up to 100% block, it is really, really powerful. It's essentially like clicking an unchallenged button or a dodge all button, right? Something to protect your team for that one turn. Very, very cool utility skill there. And then finally, this skill here. Supplemental damage to caster, and then attack without using upper turn. So she gets a self-tag team effect, but not only that, while data synchronization is in effect, it will affect your entire team. I don't think we have the supplemental value here, but I'm expecting something like 50,000 or 100,000, sort of like Braziel's. So yeah, we'll see that. So it is a tag team, but it does have a restriction. So let's get to these restrictions. So we have these two main passives here, which talk about this sort of effect. The main thing is Alpha mod and Delta mod. Alpha mod is utilized in this particular skill, and Delta mod is used in this particular skill. And then this one uses both. So Alpha mod is the offensive one. Based on your Alpha mod level, you get crit rate, and you get bonus superior elemental damage effect as well. The way to get Alpha mod is by dealing 15 hits of damage with Yatima, right? Every 15 hits, you get 1 Alpha mod level. If you do more than one set of 15 hits in one turn, so for example, if you did 30 hits in one turn, then you get 2 levels. So you can get multiple of these per turn, which is really, really nice. Next up, the Delta mod is raised by 1 every time you are targeted by a foe. Now this one is a little bit harder to get because you can only get 1 per turn. Even if you are targeted by multiple enemies, you only get 1 level per turn, which basically means if you are targeted every turn, you will have Delta mod maxed by turn 5, right? And for maxing this Delta mod, you get damage reduction and boost to debuff resistance. I've talked a little bit about this on stream, but essentially the Delta mod is the main limiting factor here because not all bosses do AoE auto attacks, and not all boss special attacks do AoE damage as well. So sometimes you will get this buff by turn 5, and sometimes you might have to wait a lot longer as well, especially if you are clicking things like Payla S3, which subs all, and now Yatima's not targeted, right? In cases like that, or you're doing redirection to other characters or whatever, Yatima's Delta mod game will be a little bit slower. So depending on the boss and depending on your team, this will be a little bit tougher to get. And I think this is impactful because getting both to 4 is really, really powerful, because that enables her to get the data synchronization effect. When both Alpha mod and Delta mod are level 4, she gets data synchronization. But if you do get this, it is very, very strong. So once it happens, you end the cooldown for her third skill. So even though this has a really long cooldown, it doesn't matter, because as soon as you get data synchronization, you can reuse it, and now it affects everybody. So very, very good effect there. And not only that, while data synchronization is in effect, Yatima gets a sharp boost to stats. Most notably, this gives her guaranteed triple attack. And then this is the really strong part, which is that she applies the effects of Alpha mod and Delta mod to the entire team. So everybody now gets crit and echo, and everybody gets damage reduction and boost to debuff resistance. So these two passives are very, very good. The effects are good. The main thing that will be the limiting factor here will be, in my opinion, the Delta mod. So because of that, this can only come out minimum turn 5, pretty much exactly the same as Yukata Anila's. There's no way to really speed it up. Like, for example, Raziel, you can manipulate your team and your button clicks to activate it on turn 1, but Yatima doesn't have that flexibility. You depend on the boss attacking your character for those 4 turns to get this ready by turn 5. So do keep that in mind there. And then she gets a third passive. So Yatima gets a really cool third passive. She ignores fire, earth, wind, light, and dark elemental resistance. So it's very similar to Cosmos there. And then this next part, it's very, very confusing the way it reads. But essentially, her normal attacks and counters deal fire, earth, and wind damage. So this is perhaps a little bit of a spoiler, but if you guys have read the society events, in particular where Yatima appears, she has the ability to control or I think it's replicate. Someone in the comments can correct me. She can replicate the M1 summons. So I'm talking like Tiamat, Colossus, those guys. So in the animations earlier, you could see that the first hit of her auto attack is Colossus's arm coming down. So with that one, she does fire damage. Her second one is Yigi's attack, so it does earth. And then the third one is Tiamat, which does wind damage. So instead of like most normal characters, instead of dealing water damage for her auto attacks, Yatima instead deals fire, earth, and then wind damage for her auto attacks. So it's a really, really cool flavor sort of passive here. And then if you have data synchronization, after those 3 auto attacks, she will do 3 hit skill nuke, and those 3 hits will be light for Lumi, dark for Celeste, and then water for Levi there as well. So a really, really cool passive, which is just sort of like a really cool flavor thing for Yatima here. Now, unfortunately though, this does have a downside, because passives like this in the past, so we've seen this on and we've also seen this deal superior elemental damage regardless of foe's element on effects like Piercing Sight before, so characters like Grand Naru's S1. The significant thing about this particular passive is the way it interacts with Ultima and Seraphic weapons. So, to show you, Seraphic weapons text reads as such: amplify water allies' damage against fire foes. This Seraphic weapon would boost all of Yatima's damage because she is a water ally and all of her damage is amplified. The Ultima weapon, however, is worded slightly differently. So if we look at the Ultima weapon, it says amplify all allies' superior elemental damage. Now, I know that Yatima's passive reads that all her damage is considered superior, but we know from testing characters like Cosmos and Naru that Seraphic weapon boosts off element damage. Like, so in Yatima's case, it'll be fire, earth, Wind, Light, and Dark, it would boost that, but Ultimate doesn't. So essentially what I'm saying is that for her main auto attack damage, this will deal 25% less damage, because if you're running an ultimate weapon, because it doesn't apply to those. It will apply to any amount of water attack damage she does. So it will apply to the water nuke, it will apply to her skills, it will apply to her Ogi, it will also apply to all the echoes, because all the echoes will be water. But it does not apply to the main hit, that is the fire, earth, wind, light, and dark damage ones. So I think that's a little bit of a shame. I hope that maybe in the future they fix it, but I don't really have high hopes, because at this point it feels intended, just because we've had it for so long with characters like Naru and Cosmos. But yeah, there's something that feels mostly like a flavor passive. It is unfortunate that she seems to be impacted by this flavor one. But perhaps the character has been balanced with that in mind already. We'll just have to wait and see. So with this banner, there are no additional raid ups. So if we take a look at this, we can see that the only raid ups are Yatima and Aletheia. So is this banner a good banner to spark? And in my opinion, yes it is. And the main reason is roulette. Normally, I would not recommend sparking on a new grand release unless you are primal in that element. But since there is a big roulette discount on this banner, I think that makes it a lot more enticing and more feasible to spark on this one. However, I do think that you need to consider the future banners that are coming up that are really important. And there's two. One is the New Year's banner, which will have Orologia. It will have Raphael. That banner is really, really significant because Orologia will be a summon you cannot spark and you cannot subtix. The only time that they will be rate up on 6% will be that New Year's banner. So on December 31st, Orologia will be there. That banner is the only time Orologia will ever be rate up on 6%. And assuming that summon is good, and chances are that they are, it is much more recommended from me to spark that banner instead of this one if you only have one spark. The other banner that's really important to consider is Valentine's. So on Valentine's Day, on February 14th, there will be Valentine's seasonal characters coming in. That banner is a really awkward banner since it falls right between this roulette and March roulette, the anniversary roulette. But it's so significant because those Valentine's characters you cannot get on the anniversary ticket in March. So if you don't spark them then, you essentially have to wait 1 year before you can get them, which is really, really rough. So those two banners are the banners you should be watching out for. New Year's Legend, December 31st, and Valentine's, February 14th. I think if you have multiple sparks, you can consider skipping Yatima here and maybe even sparking Yatima in February on Valentine's or waiting till anniversary. The only thing is that Water Guild War happens in January, which makes that timing a little bit more awkward, and I can understand wanting this character for Guild War. I think for Guild War, Yatima will be quite nice for full auto if you aren't taking the event too seriously. But if you are taking the event seriously, I do think that people are definitely going to try cook up some setups with her. I haven't seen anything yet, so it remains to be seen, but she definitely has potential in that regard. Okay, anyways, this was a bit of a longer video. Hope that was okay. But yeah, best of luck in your roulette pulls. I think I've covered everything I want to. And yeah, hopefully you get more than the 10 draws I got today. Best of luck. Expect another video for the New Year's Legend banner, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye. Bye-bye.